My name is Bruce Firestone. I'm the founder of the Ottawa Senators, and I'm here today with Ella Markel. She is a grade 10 student at Ashbury College. She's an avid reader, and she plays center mid on the school team. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, very cool. I used to play at the Australian National University of Canberra. I was the captain of the side, and
Well,
I was center fullback. And you want to know why I was center fullback, Ella?
why?
Because I could knock people down. They needed somebody. They had players who were much, much better than I was. So I couldn't play midfield. I couldn't play, striker, but I could play center fullback because, outside the box, of course, it would always be accidental, but I could knock people down.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. All right. So we're going to talk about career development, and you had a few questions you'd like to ask me. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was wondering, what did you study in university?
Yeah, so as you know, I graduated from Ashbury College. I was quite young when I graduated. I applied to go to McGill University when I was 14, and I graduated when I was 15. So I was a pretty young first-year student at McGill University in Montreal, where I took a 5-year honors degree in civil engineering. And then
Wow.
after that, I moved to Australia because, Ella, I was too young to get a job in Canada. Back then, the age of majority was 21. So
Yeah.
I applied to become an engineer with Esso, which back then was called something else. But anyway, it was an oil company based in Sarnia. And when I got through the interview process, the chief engineer said, "Well, there's something wrong with your CV." I said, "Oh my gosh, did I make a mistake on my resume? That's very serious when you do that. So that's not a good thing." He said, you're only 19 or 20." I said, "Well, that is correct." He said, "How did you graduate so early?" Well, I said, "I went to university pretty young and I finished." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, we can't hire anybody under the age of 21 because as an engineer, you can't sign or be responsible. You're still considered a child." And I
Yeah.
have to tell you, at your age, at 15 or almost 15, I didn't feel like a child. You probably don't either. And certainly at 19, I had a girlfriend. I was hoping one day to get married and have kids. I didn't feel like a child even at 19 or 20. So the guy said, "Come back in 18 months when you turn 21. I needed a job. So I moved to Australia, where the age of majority was 18 and I could get a job. And when I was in Australia, I went to the University of New South Wales and I got a master's degree in engineering science. And then after I finished that, I was invited to teach at the Australian National University in Canberra, where I did a PhD in urban economics. So I spent quite a few years in college.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Um, how did you graduate from Ashbury? Like, how did it shape you as an individual graduating from Ashbury?
Well, I think back then Ashbury was boys only, right? So
Mm.
it there were no girls there, much to my dismay, I might say. And it was a little tougher than it is today. I think a female influence probably would have been a good thing back then. And it was a military school. We had the cadet corps. We studied that sort of thing, and it was subject to quite a lot of discipline. I mean, if you acted out back then, you would get caned.
Oof.
Yeah, and I remember one of my teachers, his name was Major Anderson. He was a major in the Canadian Armed Forces. And if you stepped out of line, he'd take you to the gymnasium, and he was strong, and he would run like 3 or 4 yards and cane you. And yeah, once you've been caned a couple of times, Ella, that isn't fun. You tend to behave a little bit differently afterwards. So it really gave the boys there a lot of discipline. Maybe they wouldn't do it today, but certainly back then it was common.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. So I was wondering, how much of what you learned in all of your years of university and college relates to like what you do today?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question. I think that is a good question because one of the things that when I was a younger person, your age and a bit older, I thought some of the stuff that I was learning wasn't too relevant to anything, you
Mm.
know. And I liked physics, I liked chemistry, I liked math, but how would it relate to what I do? And it turns out almost anything that you learn, whether it's in a school setting or outside, comes to play in a career like mine, which has been, quite diverse. So I think learning for the sake of learning and following your interests wherever they may lead will pay dividends for most people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What characteristics do you think are like the most valuable to becoming as successful as you are?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm a runaway success. You know, I mean, there's people like Steve Jobs who at Apple, and there's people like Elon Musk who've created many amazing companies. So I think there's always somebody faster, bigger, stronger, better looking, smarter than I am, right? I mean, that's what goes without saying. So success is a kind of a funny word to use, and I don't tend to measure success per se. You know, I have 5 kids and a wife I love, and that to me it is success. But in terms of career development, I think there's some simple things that I've done over the years. For one, I have never liked multitasking. A lot of my students your age and older, they'll be listening to music, having a conversation on Facebook or Instagram, or watching a TikTok video. They'll have several applications open. They'll be doing their homework. They'll be talking to their pals. That I don't think leads to great productivity. Productivity is about getting into the zone. If you're going to create something really great, a great essay, or you're dealing with a very difficult problem, you got to get into the zone. If you're coding, you get into the zone. It can take anywhere from 10 or 15 or 20 minutes to get into the zone to as much as 40 minutes. So you really, at least in my opinion, you need to focus, and you need to have zero distractions. So I think the ability to do that is really, really important. And something I learned very late in my career was from a friend of mine who's been what I would consider, at least financially, very successful. He calls it TPO. What the heck does TPO stand for? It stands for touch paper once. And what he means by that is we don't really use a lot of paper today. We still do, but not a lot. What he means by that is when you start a task, you finish the task, you focus on it, and you finish. And try not to multitask. Try to do one thing, to do it very well, and then go on. Something else that helped me very early in my career, Ella, was when my boss would give me an assignment which I would consider kind of routine and almost not trivial, but routine, I guess, is the word I'll use. I would work twice as hard and twice as fast to get rid of it, so I could get onto something more interesting. And as a result of that, of course, I got more and more work loaded on me. But that also helped me in many ways. The first real job I ever had was working for the New South Wales government. And I think I was promoted like 4 or 5 times in the first 3 years. And that's because I was willing to do whatever work came my way, and to do it at the best of my ability.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Another question. How did you end up finding the Ottawa Senators?
That is a story in itself. Well, I guess we're going to be here for a couple of hours, right? I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It was back in the 1980s, as we got towards the late 1980s. And I was a real estate developer at that time. And we had been building office buildings and shopping plazas, and we'd building subdivisions, lots of homes, some industrial buildings. And some of the markets that we were involved with were overbuilt. And I was playing hockey with some of my employees. It was kind of like, at that point, it was just kind of pickup hockey. And I said to my 2 colleagues, key colleagues, Randy Sexton and Cyril Leader, listen, guys, after we finish the game, can you hang back a little bit? So we were in a dressing room at the old Lions Arena, which doesn't exist anymore. And I said to Cyril and Randy, I think the NHL is getting ready to expand again. And they said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, I think Ottawa's getting big enough now to have a National Hockey League team. They said, whoa, you think so? I said, yeah, I think so. And then I said, I think we should be the bidder. And so Randy, who's an MBA from Clarkson in the States and a hockey guy, got up right away and go, yeah, let's do it. Cyril Leader, who's a chartered accountant and more cautious, said, how much is it going to cost? So that's how it started.
Wow, it's honestly, it's so incredible. Even just the fact that I know you as a person, that we have this connection, it's amazing,
I
honestly.
think, we, with your dad, we went to Dunrobin Lake.
Yeah.
I remember that we played a few games, some silly games that we played together. And
Yeah.
then, you and I think, had a friendly relationship, and I have a lot of respect for you, Ella. I'm doing most of the talking here, and you're doing all the questions, or most of them. I have a lot of respect for you, and I think, if I live long enough, I'm going to see you do some really extraordinary things.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I mean that.
Um, I think that is where I think that is all the questions. I pretty much covered most of the stuff that I was wondering about. I guess one last thing. How would you describe your career at the moment?
Well, what happened is I have been a professor. I've been a real estate developer. I was a hockey guy,
Yeah.
and one of the things that my father told me before he passed away, and I'll pass it on to you as well, is that people should never retire. That you could change what you do, and you probably should change what you do as you get older. But just to sit at home and watch TV all day would not be good for somebody your age or somebody my age. And he said, my dad said, keep active, keep your brain going, keep your body going, be active as long as you possibly can be. And as I got ready to retire from the University of Ottawa, where I was the entrepreneur in residence, I remembered what my dad said, and I was trying to think, what would I do for Act 3?
Yeah.
The last act of my career. And I got myself a life coach, and she was fantastic. And I worked with her for a number of months. And what she did was, she said to me after we had worked together for a while, she said, Bruce, you make a pretty good coach. And I said, oh, I don't think so. Life coaching isn't for me. If you're having trouble with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, your husband or your wife, I wouldn't be any good at that.
Yeah.
Oh, she said, no, that's not what I was thinking of. You've done a lot of teaching, you've done a lot of real estate, you have some education. Maybe you could be a real estate investment and business coach. I said, oh, I kind of like that idea. And for somebody like me, Ella, when I hear a good idea, it doesn't take me very long to act. So
Yeah.
I probably had, a primitive website up fairly soon, within a day or two, probably say, Bruce Firestone, real estate investment and business coach, not knowing if anybody would want any coaching from me. And that was about 10 years ago. And it turns out that, thousands of people did. And your dad is involved in real estate in a big way, Aaron. And he has come to the same conclusion I have, and many thousands of other people, possibly many millions of others,
Yeah.
possibly billions. And that is probably one of the best ways to take care of yourself and your family and not become a burden on society or your fellow human being is to have some real estate investments, right? Maybe you just own a house, or you own a house and you rent a duplex. I mean, there's lots of different business models, but one of the best ways to take care of yourself and your family for 3 generations is to have some kind of a real estate portfolio, whether it's small or large. I think it's important. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, and I really enjoy it. Most of my coaching clients are in the States and in Canada, and it gives me a chance to help them be more independent.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I definitely think my dad, um he owns a lot of different businesses and properties, and um after he formed, a connection with you, I think that he's been able to enrich them. Like, he owns them, but he's been able to properly like develop them, and with you by his side, I just think it's fantastic.
I think, I've said it to your dad. I think Aaron is going to build something truly remarkable, and he already has, but
Yeah.
it is going in a direction. And one of the directions, and I'll mention it on the call, and that is, you know Hammond Hill, I'm sure, quite well. And Hammond Hill is really what I call a tiny house town. And the motto of the tiny house movement, Ella, do you know what the motto is?
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Okay. It's less house, more life. Less house, more life. Because a lot of people your age, young people, a bit older than you, and people my age, elders, have come to the conclusion that they don't want the huge McMansion. They
Yeah,
don't want the enormous, mortgage and the payments.
yeah,
I have a site on which my wife and I own, and we have some workshops on that site, and we have some tiny homes there too. So we have a kind of a live work condition. And one of the couples that has a tiny home on our site, their names are George and Brett. And Brett works in a jewelry store, and George is a project manager for a local company. And they have more money than I do because they're always going on these wonderful trips, and they're sending me, emails. Here, we're in Portugal today, and tomorrow it's Spain. And the reason for that is they built themselves a $54,000 tiny house. It's huge. Tiny is the wrong word. We call it Big Bertha. So this thing is huge. It's 54 feet long, and they wheeled it onto one of the sites my wife and I own, and they pay us $500 a month to park it. That's it. They have no mortgage. Their cost of living is $500 a month, which is pretty low. And so when interest rates have been going up over the last year, they're not worried about it at all. They have a good income from jobs. They have a tiny house they love. They have a little garden out front, and their cost of living is very, very, very low, and it gives them tremendous amount of disposable income. And so your dad is involved in that industry with Hammond Hill Small Living Company, Small Living Village, and he has caught a tidal wave. He's going with it, so he's surfing this tidal wave,
yeah, yeah,
and you're going with him.
yeah, yeah, hopefully.
All right. Listen, I've really enjoyed this. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you about career development.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for answering all my questions.